brave statement to make at that time. But clearly, you know, 5 years on, the pain and the grief of Lyra's loss is felt by her family and by her many friends.
It was an event that was credited, Jennifer, wasn't it, with breaking a political deadlock at Stormont. Such was the emotion in Northern Ireland at the time. I remember her funeral being televised live, and the priest who was conducting that service making quite a political statement from the pulpit, and everybody raising to their feet in the congregation and applauding him. Does her story still have as strong an impact?
Yeah, I mean, the dreadful poignancy of her story is that Lyra, you know, she described herself as a ceasefire baby. You know, she was a young woman who grew up in Northern Ireland in the 1990s at a time, you know, when peace was beginning to dawn in places, in areas of her city and in other parts of Northern Ireland where there had been such violence for so many years. So, you know, on paper, she was someone who was supposed to be immune to the types of violence that saw her lose her life. And, you know, politics in Northern Ireland, you know, many will understand when I say this, you know, politics here is defined by division. But her shooting, her killing, so, you know, 6 of the biggest political parties here unite in rejecting what happened and those responsible for what they described as a heinous crime. You know, and even the Prime Minister at the time, Theresa May, described it as shocking and truly senseless. I mean, Lyra was only 29. She had her whole life in front of her, and she was on the brink of becoming engaged to her partner, Sarah. I mean, she was doing what every young person of that age does, and she was living her life, and she goes out to follow up as journalists do in terms of writing, and she loses her life. And yeah, no, the story and Lyra and her words still resonate, and I think that they will for many years to come.
Jennifer, just finally, can you take us through what is expected to happen today?
Well, we know that though 3 men are set to be charged with her murder, another 7 men are set to be charged with disorder on the evening that she died. Now, we do expect it to get underway shortly in court here. We don't know in terms of will the full trial get underway today, or will legal argument delay it for another couple of days. But like I said, it is finally getting underway 5 years after the event that saw Lyra McKee, who was only 29 years old, lose her life.
And what is the atmosphere like there?
Well, it's busy in courts this morning. I'm standing just outside. There is a fairly extensive police presence, given the high-profile nature of this case. And there are other cases kind of going on as well inside the courts, and Monday mornings, as you'd expect, it is busy. But it will become apparent later on in terms of how the trial will continue, and we'll know more further details later this morning.
Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. That is BBC Ireland correspondent Jennifer O'Leary talking to us from outside the court in Laganside in Belfast, where 3 men charged with the murder of Belfast journalist Lyra McKee. That trial is due to start later today. Now this week, Radio 4 is running a series of programmes about boys, how they experience the world we live in, and how they are shaped by modern and frequently online notions of masculinity. Presenter Catherine Carr has 2 teenage sons, and through talking to them and to other parents of teenage boys, she became aware that boys were experiencing confusing and often troubling messages about their role in society. Catherine decided to speak to boys directly, and in a series which is running all week on Radio 4, it's called About the Boys. It features the voices of teenage boys around the country discussing topics like sex and consent, masculinity, friendship, life online and education, and what might parents and women and girls learn from these conversations. Catherine Carr joins me in the studio now. Good morning, Catherine.
Good morning.
Great to have you here. Mother of teenage boys myself, so I'm fascinated to hear what you discovered. Let's go to your experience directly, first of all, what kind of conversations were you having with your sons? Is that where this whole process began?
I mean, they would kill me if I said it was all to do with them. It's not. It's to do with them a little bit, of course, because, you know, kids come home from school, they come to the dinner table, they mention things in passing. Usually with teenagers, they want to talk to you at 11:20 p.m. at night when something's on their hearts and their minds. But there was a few little tidbits that they shared from school, but coupled more with chats with friends, I would say. And one conversation sticks out in particular, a very good friend talking about her boys who were slightly older than mine at the time, so maybe 16, 17. And we were talking about sex and relationships in teenagers. And she said, you know, my son has told me that it's quite normal or quite acceptable now for boys to video themselves asking for consent before anything sexual happens, or even leaving the phone recording for the entire time. And I thought, whoa, hold on a second. This is troubling on so many levels, and as with the whole series, this isn't just troubling for the boys. It's not a silo that boys live in, it's girls and boys living together, and I thought, that's actually horrifying. And that was the time I started thinking, you know what, I'm going to read a bit more about this and look into the research and start talking to my own boys a little bit more. And the more I talked, the more these sorts of, not total patterns, not everybody fits into a mould, of course, but these sorts of themes emerged that boys seem to be dying to talk about. So I thought, this sounds like something I could make or do, seeing as I'm a mum of teenage boys, yes, but also someone who owns a microphone.
Yeah, well, you've done a fantastic job. We'll get on to listening in on those conversations on consent in a moment. How did you find the teenage boys to talk to you?
Well, once I'd decided on the themes, and they did change a little bit, because once I went out to talk to the boys, and I was really clear from the outset that I wanted the boys to be the stars of the show, and they are. If they told me that I was barking up the wrong tree, like a silly middle-aged mum, then I would go and find another tree. So, you know, one of the ideas, I thought, I'll talk about role models, that sounds super. Then I went out to talk to boys, and they sort of looked at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, I do, but it's also not very exciting. So that changed into, let's talk about ideas of masculinity, which, as you referenced in your introduction, you know, they're familiar with influencers online selling them ideas, often quite nefarious and quite wrong-headed and quite dangerous ideas about masculinity. So they got that. So once I'd got my 5 topics, as I say, I wanted the boys to be the stars of the show, but I'm not into creating dramatic audio just so that people have like crazy clips to share. I wanted to tell the truth, so I wanted to find normal boys, boys who were happy being boys, boys who were struggling being boys, boys who were curious, all of the mix, and I wanted it to fit what researchers before me have found through years and years and years of qualitative and quantitative academic research. So I sort of talked to some experts first